Hello, welcome to Carolina Classrooms. I'm Dr. Toby Jenkins, Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Graduate School at the University of South Carolina. Equity is a term used to describe fairness. In an education setting, it is making sure that every student has the tools and resources that they need to succeed in the classroom. Each student has different needs, and each district faces different challenges to meet those needs. On this episode of Carolina Classrooms, we'll hear from South Carolina educators and learn what they're doing to ensure that their students have an equitable education experience.
We've had this long debate for years about equity and equality, and we look at equality and everyone getting everything the same thing and same resources, no matter what their needs are. Dividing everything equally. And for years, we've seen that hasn't worked. It hasn't benefited some of our populations that are in lower socioeconomic areas. And so equity to me means basing those resources and other things on the needs, dividing proportionately. There was an example of a conversation that I had with a district where I'm from. There were 150 laptops. Every school got 150 laptops, but every school didn't need 150 laptops, where you had other schools who were short on laptops. So in cases like that, making sure that we give schools what they need so that we can have a fair outcome for everyone involved. And it's important, probably now more than ever, with the coronavirus pandemic. We knew there were equity issues, but now it's really highlighted the equity issues. And so it's important, if we want everyone to be successful, that we look at the lens through equity and not necessarily equality.
We use the term education equity really to identify fairness. I think it's the best way to describe it. We have to be aware, especially those of us in leadership roles, of policies, procedures, programs, practices, all things that, unintentionally could lead to unfairness or inequality in what we're doing within a school district. These are all things that can have a positive or a negative impact on student performance. And, obviously our goal, our end state is to try to see each individual child maximize their skills and their abilities. So, to provide equity in education means that we have to put systems in place that are going to ensure that each individual child has an equal opportunity for success.
Representation, racial inequities, socioeconomic factors, and access to resources affect what students learn and their sense of belonging in the community.
Conspicuous evidence of inequity can make a student feel rejected, forgotten, or overlooked. I mean, I grew up in Colleton County. I grew up in Round Oak. And, sometimes just crossing the county line, it can be very striking what, the differences between Colleton and Dorchester or Colleton and Beaufort. That can have a powerful effect on the drive to learn. One example that our superintendent, Mr. John Tyndall, likes to mention a whole lot, it can be very small things that people don't even think about. One of the things he likes to refer to is the buses and buildings problem. And what he means by that is, let's say that you have a sports team. They travel outside the county to a neighboring one to play a football game or something like that, or a basketball game. They see better high quality buses. They see better high quality buildings and that sort of thing. Even regular stuff like that, maybe the average person doesn't think about so much. But seeing that and knowing that that's only 30 minutes away from where they live, but they don't see evidence of that in their own community, that can be very damaging.
When I came to Williamsburg County in April 2018, April 12th, 2018, I was visiting one of the media centers one day at a high school. And when I walked into the media center, I'm gonna be honest with you, I've been in education for close 40 years, over 40 years. And when I walked into this high school media center, and when I witnessed the condition of the media center, I'm gonna be honest with you, I actually walked out, and I know that this interview is not about me, But I want to share with you how it impacts you as an instructional leader. I had to actually walk outside of that media center, compose myself before I could call my essential partner at the State Department. I walked out of the media center and I called Miss Latoya Dixon. She was at that time, she was our liaison from the State Department to the school district. And when I attempted to speak with her, I had to actually take several deep breaths to be able to ask the question that I was going to ask her. And the question I asked her was, I said, Dr. Dixon, have you visited the media center at the school that I'm standing in now? And she said, no, Dr. Walder, tell me about it. And at that time, I proceeded to tell her that. I said, you know what? We are 18 years into the 21st century. I walked into a media center today where there were banquet tables and banquet chairs as the form of furniture in the media center. The books were such that 95% of them needed to be expunged. And it was such a devastating experience for me at that age. I'm thinking, oh my God, what have the children been experiencing? And when I came back in the building, I proceeded to speak with the media specialist. And she said to me, she said, I am so glad that you are addressing this issue because sometimes when we have our academic challenges, she said the other children from the other school districts actually tease our students about how the media center looked. And in defense of the State Department, they immediately forwarded some funds so we could actually change the interior of the media center and purchase new books and so forth. So when you talk about equity with the curriculum, yes, all that's important because if you do not have equity, you will not be able to provide student-friendly environments that's conducive for learning. So it is important that all persons in this state understand that we can no longer continue to allow the zip code to decide the quality of education that our students receive in this state.
I think it affects students differently. I don't know if there's one way that it may impact or affect a student, but I think it's important that students have access to those resources. I think that it can continue to exacerbate this idea or create this narrative that students may be unsuccessful in academics because you're giving them this kind of one-size-fit-all academic experience, particularly students of color, particularly students who have been marginalized in their educational experiences up to a certain point. And so it's really important for us to kind of rewrite those narratives and put those students in positions where they have an opportunity to be as successful as anyone else. And so we have to be kind of committed and steadfast in our approach to provide our students with premier educational experiences. And so it requires for those experiences to be honest, for them to be accurate, and for them to be all inclusive.
In April 2019, sixth grade students at Simmons Pinckney Middle School took on a project examining segregation in their school district. Their teacher and principal believed they should be informed of their history to understand what was happening in their community.
Mostly in ELA and social studies, we do projects based off our environment and stuff like that. And right now we're working on a project that's about segregation.
We're working on collaboration, getting to know each other, and understanding more about history.
The documentary that we're working on is to know why are we still in segregation today and give them a reason why we shouldn't be in segregation today.
Some schools are still divided by race, wealth, and test scores.
They're actually starting our initiative for project-based learning, They take on social issues and real world issues to see how they could influence change and be the change agents.
A lot of the history of segregation, Plessy v. Ferguson, 14th Amendment, Brown versus Board of Education, trying to bring it into the current, what's going on now, so the kids can see what was, what is, where the differences are, and what they can do to change what we believe is, to some degree, still a very segregated Charleston County School District.
I made me feel surprised because some things I didn't know about. There's a lot of things people don't know, and if you would find out about it, then you would really want to change it.
The name on our building, the Rhett Building, it is named after the son of a Confederate general who didn't believe African Americans needed an education. He believed that they could be errand boys and cooks and maids, and built Burke High School, which is just, we share a campus with the thought of just training, not educating. And he was the superintendent of Charleston County School District for 35 years. So this building was dedicated to him. However, thanks to the Heritage Act, that name can't be removed, even though this is an academic setting, which he did not approve of for African Americans, and we have a 98% African American student body. If they don't learn the history, they can't change the present and the future.
We're learning about segregation. It is important to learn about because it is happening around the world, and we need to find a solution to stop it and have many reasons and learn many reasons why is it happening.
I think it's important because everyone should learn about their history. As sixth graders and young adults, we should know about our schools and what became of the people in our schools.
Where we can make people hear our voice, our opportunities, and our equalness.
Be their voice, definitely. Realize that they do play a role in their education. And I think so many of them feel like they don't, but they really are in charge of their education moving forward.
But like, if everyone come together in a community, there will be no problems or anything, and everyone would the world be more peaceful, there'll be less violence, and then that's why we learn about history.
Attempts to treat everyone the same, no matter their differences, can be detrimental to students in the classroom. Statements such as, "I don't see color," disregard rich cultural history.
When we look at African American history, often in schools, people, the curriculum starts with enslavement. And you might hear a little bit about enslavement and maybe something about civil rights. Often those are not told from the perspective of Black people. They don't highlight the assets. There's no mention of the rich thousands of years of history of Black people before even being brought to this country. And so those, the 400 years of enslavement and colonization are a very small part of Black people's history. And so that's a kind of attack, that's that omission of that important history gives Black children and other children the impression that Black people have not done much.
History that is documented and shared by the people who lived it offers a more accurate representation of these experiences. Bringing these stories into the classroom helps to capture the students' attention and gives them a better understanding of the world around them. Educators are working to expand the curriculum offered at their schools, offering students more options to choose the way that they learn best.
It really requires you having a great understanding of your population of students and your community. And it's really not stepping into this kind of pre-designed box that we call an educational experience. It's really about crafting a new educational experience or a new box of educational experiences. And so it's really being creative and innovative in creating spaces where people find the reassurance of their value and worth through the different types of programs that you may create in your district. So that may be whether it's magnet programs, it may be your art programs, it may be the programs you have for your special education students, it may be your after school programs, it may be the access to courses in your schools that everyone has access to high level courses, everyone have access to courses where they can find their interests, where they can basically tap into the things that they're passionate about.
It's not just necessarily access to resources. We hired a coordinator of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our district a couple years ago, shortly after I got here. Her team is working with our teachers on a construct called culturally responsive teaching. And really, if you dig into the research, you'll see that many, not all teachers come from middle-class families. Many of them are second and third generation educators. And so they don't necessarily have the experience of, the different populations or demographics because that's not where they come from. And so we're trying to be intentional about training our teachers on the importance of including a student's cultural background and using those references in all aspects of learning.
Building these relationships in the classroom can cut down on the number of discipline issues and change the way problems are dealt with.
So it's clear as day in the data that shows that disproportionately starting as early as preschool, that Black students, both male and female, are disproportionately being kicked out of classrooms. And without doubt, when they're kicked out of classrooms, they're missing academic face time where they are able to continue to learn and grow. But then we have to come back and think about why they're being kicked out of the classrooms. Are they being fairly disciplined? Are they being fairly reprimanded? Are they given the same chances that their colleagues are and their peers are being given? And we know that truthfully they're not. So we had to rethink discipline from the core of what it means to kind of like our idea of like misbehavior, and we as teachers and educators, we have to find ourselves in our classrooms to be able to look at what things that are causing us, are triggers for us, what things are triggers for our students, and working through those so we come up with a classroom community. So when we talk about relationships, when we think about relationships in the sense of discipline, if we take the time to build a relationship with our students, one, they're a little less likely to misbehave in your classroom. And two, we have come to a place when if someone does mess up in our class, we can handle it in our class. We can come to a common consensus. We can repair the broken pieces in our classroom community when we are one classroom community versus people in the same classroom.
We have additional personnel that we've hired to ensure that we capture kids where they are. We have embedded within the curriculum, we have a cultural competency piece within our curriculum to ensure that all of our teachers understand our students. So for example, with our cultural competency piece, if a teacher sees a student that is not participating or maybe acting out or maybe more disruptive on a particular day, we don't punish the student by sending the student necessarily to the office. The teacher may pull the student to the side, and the teacher may talk the student, just get to the root cause. We use SEI, social emotional involvement with our students to make sure that that whatever that issue is that's going on, maybe it is lack of food, maybe it is lack of housing, maybe it is lack of something, and that's the reason why the student is acting out. They don't know how to maybe express how they're feeling, so they may be disruptive in school or in class. And even pre-COVID, we put policies in place, particularly to reduce the number of African American students who are being suspended.
Classrooms and the community need to work together to explore possibilities and create opportunities.
The educational system, I feel like, especially here, should be based on the challenges and the problems that people face here. If we're in a rural community and there are not a lot of industries and resources here for people to take advantage of, and so we need to produce the type of people that we're going to need in order to revitalize our communities. And so housing, for example, if I have someone come to any of my rentals and I need a carpenter, or I need a plumber, or I need an electrician, or if I need an architect, I can't find any of the people who were born and bred here to be able to do that type of work, that have that type of skill. And so when students come into an educational system, our curriculums need to be designed in such a way that those type of educational experiences can be offered to our students, so that not only are they prepared for the workforce, they are also prepared to be entrepreneurs and those who have the skills and the abilities to revitalize their own communities and their own homes. It's not just based on the standards that the state provides, but also going beyond that and creating a curriculum and an educational experience that allows you to develop the type of skills that you will need in order to be way more successful than what we are.
Parents and guardians play a major role in their children's education.
We do need the resources within the classroom, but to me, equity needs to start at home. I think that's where our biggest gap is what I'm seeing right now as a classroom teacher.
In terms of relationships with parents, in my personal experience, starting from a place of non-judgment and really curiosity, and ending with a place of non-judgment and curiosity, because every single family is different. What do we do when families are not showing up in a way that we can be strong partners? Those are really complicated questions and issues, but I'll just give one example. If a parent is not showing up because they're working 2 or 3 jobs and, they're working a night shift, and so, it's their time of rest, when a school function is going on, then, how can we be flexible around that? And then in terms of, stakeholders and elected officials who are watching this, how can we make sure that the minimum wage is actually a living wage so that our families don't have to work 2 and 3 jobs and they can give that time and attention, to families? So that's one small piece of the puzzle, in my opinion. But, the school is really a microcosm of the entire society.
Highly encourage home and school to have that connection where we're working hand in hand, where students see that we're in this together. We're almost like a 24-hour school. That's what I like to say. We early bird, lunchtime tutoring, after school tutoring. We try to offer programs, sometimes at different times, morning, afternoon.
As a child who grew up in a poor, poverty-stricken environment, I can tell you it does not take a whole lot for the parents to be involved in that child's learning, to push that child and to let that child know that he or she is supported and that education is valued within the home life.
You can read about a lot of things, but I don't think you can really garner a true understanding without experiencing it. And I think one of the easiest way, well, I shouldn't say easiest, it's a challenge for some folks, but it's really important to establish relationships with those different populations of individuals. For my experience, a lot of those families, when they were kids themselves in school, may not have had a positive experience in the school setting. And so that's our first barrier or challenge we have to overcome. And I think you do that by meeting them where they're comfortable and not always meeting them where you're comfortable, which would be in a school building.
What I hope to see is that we don't stop working to identify issues of inequity and removing the barriers, the systemic and systematic barriers that inequity create, that we don't stop addressing issues of we don't stop addressing issues of racism and racist practices that we know exist in society that trickle their way down into schools, that we don't stop identifying issues of poverty and dismiss the issues of poverty and how it impacts the student learning and their learning experiences, that we don't stop fighting for funding for schools, and that we don't stop addressing the issues of health disparities within different communities and how those health disparities work their way into schools, that we don't stop working to recruit the best and brightest teachers for our students, and that we ensure that our students can see themselves in their teachers, that their teachers can reflect who they are and as well. So that's what I hope, that we continue that type of work in our district, and that we start to close those barriers, that we start to close the opportunity gaps that exist for our students, so that we can close the knowledge gap that exists, and we can work on the learning gaps that may exist, so that all of our students can have an opportunity to achieve at the highest level possible.
Thanks for joining us. You can find this episode and other education stories from around the state on our website at carolinaclassrooms.org.